I know Hank was giving us an example. I don't know if it was true, but if he believes it or not. Like he's like, by the third date, you're gonna be giving me your credit score. I need to know your credit score and stuff. That might be true. I know Hank, that's probably true. But as an example, I think things have to happen in timing too, right? Even within intentions, you need enough time to kind of see a person's character and learn certain things about them. I think Rami has said about the microwave, dating or what have you. I think that's part of that too. Like certain things that are personal, I need to enough time to get to know your character to see if I can trust you to reveal certain things that are very personal, right? Um, and then somebody else has said something, I can't remember who, but I had wrote that there's a difference between, Viz, you was talking about more, I think you and Clout were talking about morals. Um, I do think there's a difference between respecting and accepting. I can respect you, but I don't have to accept your lifestyle, your belief system, your political stance, all of those things, but I could still respect you. Um, I think a person should stand firm in their beliefs and what their morals are, what their standards are, and just find that tribe who stands on that same thing. The problem comes is when you're trying to enforce your standards, your belief, your morals on other people who is not about that. And then, you still try to interact and build relationship with them when you shouldn't, right? And that wastes time too. Um, Last one. Um, Trying to because we were talking about, I think Clout said something about tradition and like holding on, to stuff when things are different. And I actually agree with him. On Monday, I was on Humble Dad show, and that was something that we talked about, where people sometimes get caught up in tradition and continue to do the same thing, where the old tradition doesn't necessarily work in a new environment. When you have an environment in an era which things were set up a certain way, those traditions worked. Whereas now, the environment and the era that we're in, the generation that we're in, is totally different. So those traditions, while they are important, there is a different way in which they need to be expressed. So when we're talking about, typically when we say men protectors and providers, when you're talking about the 60s and below, 50s, 40s, 30s, right? The protection and provision literally were physical things. Like they go get a job, they pay the bills, they protect the family from, we'll say lions, tigers, and bears, right? But in this environment now, when we're in a generation where women are in a position where they can make their own money, right? So they can provide their own financial provision, right? Back in the day, that's what provision meant: house, car, money, stuff like that. Women didn't have bank accounts. So that environment was set up for women to rely on men, right? Where this generation is not. So that tradition is going to look totally different. The expectations that women are going to have of men now are going to be totally different. And that's where I think the emotional piece come in. And that's where we're bumping heads, because men are stuck on the old idea of what tradition is and being with a woman, versus now women are expecting something different.
And, and that right there lies where the collision is happening, right? Like women have evolved, past what the frame of thinking or teaching that most men operate on, and they're just not aligning. They're not aligning, on a political sense. They're not aligning on a spiritual sense. I mean, there's a lot of men who are not in the church. You know what I'm saying? There's a lot of men who, um, find entertainment, enjoying other things outside of the entertainment of social media, the gossip, and all these other things, unfortunately. And I think that there has to be a larger conversation with both sides at some point. I mean, you actually hit on something really interesting that I really did like, mistaken. And I was kind of curious about it. Do you think that parents at an early age should have some sort of sort of like parental oversight in conversation about how they should date, the things that they should talk about? I mean, I know we've talked about like the things that we teach our kids, but like really, really, really hammer it down, because if we understand what's happening out here, and by the time they get to a certain age, and things have you change and evolve, and let's say it's just going down for the worse, how are we preparing them to navigate that in the dating area, right? Like,
I,
how are we?
from what I see working with, students and actually parents, is just like I think is a reflection of what we see now when we were talking about communication, right? There's a lack of communication even with adults. Adults don't know how to talk to their children. And children naturally, when they get, especially teenage, they kind of pull away from adults. And it's easier because if you didn't establish communication and connection with your kids when they're young, is easier to really not know who the hell they are once they become teens. I do think it's very important to instill certain morals and values and stuff in your kids because it gives them something to align with, even though they don't want to talk to you, they know what they've been taught. And I think we have not invested enough in our children to teach them. And then we put that responsibility on the school system to do it. And then get frustrated with the school system because the school system is teaching them things that you didn't want them to know. But had you been a parent to begin with, then regardless of what the school is saying, your child has a knowledge base from what they were raised in, right? So, but one of the things I know,
That's
like
not
in
a
Muslim
that's not
tradition,
100% effective though.
the Muslim, like if you're Muslim, Jehovah Witnesses, what I can appreciate, I had was a coworker with Jehovah Witness, and when they are dating, even as grown people, they never date one on one ever. They date in groups. So the focus of the dating is to see if this is going to be a good mate or a good match for marriage. So their whole purpose is dating with intent. I believe Muslims are, similar to that as well. I think what
So,
happened with
but
us, we
mistaken,
just
do
moved
you
from
think
that.
that should change? Because what you just said, when you agree with Cloud, is that those traditions don't work in this modern time.
Yes, I did, but I wasn't specifically speaking to that tradition. I do think it's important for people to be, and I know a lot of people don't agree with me, but I do think it's important for other people to be involved in the dating. If the focus of the dating is to be married. Now, if you're just dating F, then that's something totally different. Then do however you're gonna do. But when people have emotions involved and there's attraction involved and physical, attraction involved, sometimes the red flags are overlooked, right? So having other people that have your best interests at heart and also have the same mindset of dating with the purpose, with the intent to get married, they may see things that you won't see and are able to kind of bring it up to you and question that, right? Make you reflect on that. So I do think it's important to have other people involved in that process. And I think that's a tradition that would be very helpful because it could help minimize the damage that men and women both go through with trying to go at it on their own without having any sense of direction.